You're listening to A Quality Podcast with your hosts, John Thacker Jr. and Jake Harrell.
Those are the two things, ownership and enlightenment. If you do those two things, you're going to make my life easier. You're going to make those around you a little bit easier because they know that you're going to facilitate that conversation to a mutual understanding. So that's my plea to everybody is let's work on it. We can't just push it under the rug anymore, but let's just get better at it.
I'm your host, John Thacker, and we're here with James Gable to talk about uncommon communication. I'm just kidding. I wanted to give the worst intro you've ever seen in your life, like uncommon communication. James, how we doing?
I'm doing great, man. And I've had my name messed up worse, so I don't think you were trying that hard.
It's French, right? James Gable?
Gable. If I told you I've never heard gobble gobble before in high school, I would be lying to you.
Oh my gosh. What's the middle name?
Andrew.
James Andrew. Oh, well, that's safe. If it would have been like Marie, we would have had a whole 10-minute bit about it.
Yeah. Well, I was supposed to be a girl, according to my mom.
Well, I've heard that more than once, but John tells me not to tell anyone. So, James,
we didn't have pronoun.
Tell us about what's behind you in the Uncommon Communicator.
Yes, sir. Well, so the Uncommon Communicator is a podcast that I started with a co-host, my daughter's boyfriend, Brandon. He is a communications major from MSU here in Denver area. And they've been dating, and he's a communications guy, works at Starbucks. So I had it in my mind to start a podcast on communication, and I'm very passionate about in trying to help people find success in their communication. And seems to me so simple, and that's the part that I want to keep it simple, but we complicate things so much. And so that podcast, and then we also started a website, which is probably the cheapest looking website you'd ever go to. But if you go and visit the website, we've got our podcast on it. It's going to be the wealth of communication here in the future, as soon as I find some millennial to help me punch in all the buttons on it.
Well, I'm here. So if you have questions or comments, I am your guy.
Yeah, make it easy. Just make it pretty and buttons that push. So that's all I want.
So in your daytime, you're in the construction world?
Yes, sir. So I'm a general superintendent for Adolphson and Peterson, general superintendent on our small projects group. So we do about $30-40 million a year of small project work, which is one really big, easy job, I'm going to call it, or it's 56. We do about 50-60 jobs a year across the Denver metro area. And I manage the crews, everything in the field side. So organizationally, I've got a director, and we've got a guy who manages the project managers, and I have everything in the field.
So how much of your job is just communication?
Say that again.
How much of your job is just communication?
100% of it. Yeah, there's times where I'm actually working on a schedule for a project where I haven't pushed the buttons in a while. I almost prefer not to push the buttons, but everything that I do for my job, I've had a good day when I've communicated, when I've helped other people communicate. And the one thing in leading into lean, I'm definitely a lean amateur when it comes to implementation, but I love the aspect of the communication side of it, because visual boards, those type of ideas of expressing how to do the process in a visual board and communicate that stuff still seems to be the biggest hindrance that we run into on all of our teams, on all of our jobs. It's like, you never told me, I didn't know that. And like, how could you not know? It's wrote on the board really big. Or on the other side, guys aren't communicating that. There's that expectation that people know things. And what I like about lean construction is that communication side where we're actually communicating it visually, where it kind of eliminates those excuses.
And, I've got some back and forth on LinkedIn, if you're unfamiliar with a bunch of the lean construction community, but mad love for my lean builders. This is an Adam Hoots Deluxe. So thank you for sending that to me in the mail, Mr. Adam. Love the work that they're doing out there with the boots on the ground. So what's got you interested in the world of communication?
it goes all the way back to as a high schooler. Like, I have always been fascinated with words, fascinated with, it's almost problem solving. And that's been my newest name. I've named myself the communication problem solver, because it's taken a puzzle of where somebody's trying to go from here to here and trying to solve it between different people. Backing up a couple of years, I told my boss that, because we knew communication across our organization, across even our individual teams, is always the cause of problems, causes of budget issues, causes of schedule issues. It's always comes down to that one thing. And I told him, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out that key to communication. And so I really just dove into it thinking that there was just going to be one magic key. We put that magic key in, and then we unlock the communication, within our teams. And as you might know, that's not the case. Like, it is not one magic key, but it's a combination lock. And with that, I came up with this idea of really enlightenment. With the idea of enlightenment is, you and I have to know we're communicating. And it's amazing how much people don't realize. Like, have you had those conversations where somebody is talking for an hour and doesn't breathe, like doesn't even give you a break, where you've backed out the door? I'm like backing out the door and he's right here, and even that close talker, and you realizing we're not communicating. They're just putting words out there. So they're not seeing that enlightenment of communication isn't occurring across both people. So that idea of enlightenment, as simple as it sounds, not very common. So there was that idea. And then, as well as, who do we have the skills that it takes to communicate with individuals? It's a skill set. It is a learned skill set that we first initially on our podcast started out with Never Split the Difference with Chris Voss, going through those techniques of negotiation, because negotiation really becomes listening and learning how to listen. And listening seems to be the key, but everybody has different styles. Some people are quiet. Some people are assertive. So the different styles, you have to change your style of communication to meet their needs. So it became this combination piece. And I thought, let's just share this. Let's talk about two simple ideas that are probably the hardest thing for anybody to really put into place.
The thing with the hosting a podcast is you get people frothing at the mouth, only listening so they can regurgitate their response. Like, they're only just, "Are you done talking yet, James? Are you done talking yet?" Instead of like synthesizing what you're putting out. And your point is fantastic. The enlightenment, maybe I'll use a less righteous word, but just knowing that you're being communicated with is not clear between all parties. And having that first, that clarity, is like one of the biggest levers I've found in actually solving problems out in the world. A truism John gave me about a week ago was that anytime there's a conflict between two or more humans, the first thing you need to realize is both humans are trying to solve the same problem. And I thought, oh my gosh, that messes with me big time. So what can I pick on in your background? Is that a bonsai tree behind you?
That is it's funny. I just put this all together. We're looking to go video and fancy like you guys are. I don't have a fancy radio. We just put that together this morning, but wanted something in the background other than just the white screen. And, it's like, hey, here's the dynamic communication guy with the white background. I thought that would really paint the right picture for everybody, but it is a bonsai. I had at one time almost 40 trees. It became an obsession. Like a lot of things with me, I would have been an alcoholic in the streets, living alone, if I didn't have other obsessions. My family is a family of alcoholics. My mom and dad were alcoholics, and I've taken those addictions, turned it into work addictions, and one thing after another. And bonsai was it for a long time. But I have about 3 left in my collection, and that is one of them.
I like that story. I showed up to work one time at 11 p.m. This was maybe 2 weeks ago. And I walked through the door and people were like, why? Like, you're like an 8 to 5er. Why would you be here at 11 p.m.? And I was telling the story that my brother went to jail. And I got this 1-800 call from the jail that's like, do you want to accept this? And I told it no, because I didn't want to get into it. Long story to unpack there. But in the middle of it, I have this innate habit built in me I didn't even realize, where if something terrible or something reminds me of my traumatic past or my world of addictions or whatever extras, my default response is shut up and go to work. That is my default, what I've replaced my obsessions with. So it was 11 o'clock at night and I got off the phone. I was like, all right. And I drove to work and I got there before I realized that's what I that was what Jake's behaviorism had become.
Yeah. And that's that type of addiction, that addiction mentality, it feeds everywhere. I mean, it's clearly something you go back to, and I've read some books on trying to understand being, an adult child of an alcoholic. It really defines who your personality is to a point where it's like, it was kind of eye-opening. But in understanding those things, I hate to say this, but it helped my career for sure. Because it made me dedicated to work at the time. I'm always finding different things like podcasting. That's my thing now. Communication is kind of my addiction right now. I want to learn and do everything that I possibly can to learn about it, to share with others, create communication plans. That's just kind of my new buzz right now is communication. And somebody asked me if I don't like being bored, and I don't, so that's probably part of it. The bonsai it took up a good chunk of my life for a long time. And then it finally got to the point where like you have to defoliate them, you got to trim them, you got to do all this work. And that's the addiction part is one wasn't enough. So then I needed one more, then I needed another one. So I had something to do every weekend. And then there was one day I'm like having to trim this thing, and I'm like, this is work. This is like work.
That is
so
what this is.
We're moving on from this one. I don't want to work when I get off of work.
I've got, and I'm going to read the beautiful story. We talked about it before I hit record of one of our major connection points. So we've been connected for some time now, and I'm not exactly sure how. Do you know how or where that originated?
When I started messing around in the lean world with those, like my podcast has more listeners in Texas than it does in the great state of Colorado that I reside in, because I've made those connections with the folks like Jesse and Jen Lacey and Buddy Brumley and James Cantorius, and a lot of these guys that are on LinkedIn through that lean, and then of course through their postings. How do you not find the Lady Gaga of lean? So that was that first thought. I'm like, what is going on with that one? So I think that goes back to that idea. That was even before I knew you had a podcast. So just out trying to make connections with people in the community, because that's what I'm finding I get more value from people within LinkedIn, people who are in the lean community are willing to share this information. That's the eye-opening part to me about lean, is these connections that you make. People want to share these things. It's not I found the secret to doing this, so I'm not going to tell anyone. We're sharing across our teams these new ideas. And, you'd mentioned a part about it being stodgy, which is my impression of it. Like I've been to a lean conference where I'm pretty sure there was a 1963 piece of paper that was being read from, like even the
oh my gosh.
Oh, it was that old, I don't want to drop names, but like Dick Bear and those type of those are, I just dropped a name, but those type of people who have studied it at such a high level that I'm a keep it simple guy. And that's the whole thing with communication as well too. But with lean, we've complicated it. I'm a 3S guy. Now, I know there's at times
I'm a 2S guy. Your 3S is too complicated.
I love that as well then too. Tell me, what are your 2S's?
Huh? I didn't think I'd be put on the spot, James. What are your 3S's?
Let's keep it simple.
What are your 3S's?
Sweep, sort, and shine.
Sweep? No.
Maybe I don't know them. Are you editing this thing?
I'm editing it, and I'm going to make it worse.
It's actually a sticky note up on my other computer. I think it's, this is embarrassing.
Shoot, shit, and simple.
Keep it simple, stupid. Well, the idea is this, but the 3 S's, there's in the 5S, the 2 of them repeat it, which I think ends up being sustain. Like, why are you sustaining if you're doing the other ones? Or maybe it's sustain. But anyways, we've complicated things by adding too many S's in there. And I was part of, when I worked at Coors, they were going through a 7S process. I'd heard of 5S. They had upped it to 6 because they wanted to add some other function in there. And then all their posters were 7S. I mean, like, what's all this S going on? We overcomplicate things when we should keep it simple. I love your idea of 2 S's as soon as we figure out which 2 those are.
Yeah, which 2 are the most important of them. I did take one time on LinkedIn, somebody shared a 9S methodology. And I took the time, like 45 minutes of my day, to copy every S word in the English language and drop like 40 comments that pasted the maximum character limit of every S word. I was like, it's the 1147 S methodology. So the rest of the world, they're not going to win. But let me share just a little bit. We've been connected for a long time, but I want to share the comment that moved it from we're connected to I'm in love a little bit. It's not the Hawaiian shirt. It's your LinkedIn commentary. And
Okay.
you're sharing a comment about a podcast interview I did over a year ago now with Jesse Hernandez. And your comment says, when I think of enlightenment, I think of a time that Jake Harrell, the funniest lean guy, that would be me, shared a story on A Quality Podcast, the show you're listening to right now, ladies and gentlemen, about a gentleman he found sleeping on the job. Those that sleep on the job get fired immediately. This guy had worked over 50 days straight, and they moved him from nights to a day shift. They did pretty much everything but give him a pillow and tell him not to fall asleep. This story has stuck with me, opened my eyes, and truly gave enlightenment about systems thinking. It changed how I think and has made me hungry to learn more about broken systems. This is the same level of enlightenment that you can achieve when it comes to conversations and communication. Holy shit, James. I don't think my dad has ever said anything I enjoyed that much.
That sounds better when you read it too.
Oh, yeah, a little inflection, a little flavor at the end.
I like that. I can hear the love in your voice when you're reading that too.
When you said it, I spent like a week. I called Felipe, I called John. I was like, who is this guy? I don't know my father very much, but is my last name Gable?
It could be.
It could. I mean, you don't have enough nose to really be my father, but.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm getting there. I'm working on it.
Oh, maybe you do. The camera holds up pretty well. Maybe you do. What do you think, audience?
It's all about angles, Jake.
I had a running inside
joke
with a Sam Morgan that the bigger your nose is, the better you are at continuous improvement. And we went and scrolled through like 50 people we know mutually. And you know what? They all got some noses on them. They do. It's a weird, I'm not saying it's correlation, or it's not causation, but it is correlation. Is that how you say that?
I'll go along with that. Sure. I make words up all the time. That's the best
good.
part about being a communication guy. People are like, I've never heard that before. I'm like, you have now.
I resemble that remark. Big communication guy in the podcast space. What are your feelings on running your own podcast now? How many episodes are you in?
We're at 35, and I took last week off. I had the deadly COVID last weekend, survived it, and we actually took a week off, which is kind of a rarity for us. And so we're 35 episodes in. We're at 21 episodes, and my co-host is a big movies guy or TV guy. I mean, he knows all that whole space, word for word. And he's like, our season needs to end at 21. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's a season on television. We're not on television. But he wanted to end at 21. So we haven't decided yet. I was checking you guys out. You're like in season 3, but I don't know how many years it's been. It's all very confusing to me. So we haven't decided when we're going to have our second season yet. But 35 episodes in, we're considered mildly successful. Those are the words I like to use. We haven't failed. And we haven't hit 6,000 downloads an episode. So somewhere in the middle of that number, we're mildly successful. But I think the biggest part is there is a group of individuals, at least a half a dozen, who give me some feedback, give me comments. So I don't know what the depth of that whole podcast is, but at the end of the day, I learn more than maybe anybody even listening to it. Because the research that goes into it, the speaking, talking about these things, and then creating these in my conversations throughout the rest of my week help me be a better person. So if I'm bettering myself, then maybe we've got a record for it on the podcast, Annals Forever.
I love that it actually does make a little community. Like in my past 2.5 years-ish of trying to get into this space on LinkedIn and moving to being the Grand Wizard, the Lady Gaga of Lean. Funny side story. I'm going to tell you where that name came from. But Felipe, Engineer Manriquez, Jesse Hernandez, Adam Hoots, all these people I just wouldn't have in my life. And I have them all in my life through channels of communication like what we're sharing right here and now.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's an amazing platform that when it really went undiscovered before I got into podcasting. I wasn't, a big listener of podcasts either. And it's amazing how many people don't know how. It's like, how do I find you? I post those little snippets, which again, we need to move to video, but my guy's he's a radio guy, but we'll get there. But anyways, we don't, the little sound bites that I do, the Buzzsprout sound bites that they provide, I try to art them up and fancy them up. And I ran into two people in the same week who were like, hey, listen to your podcast. I'm like, oh yeah. Like where? Where are you listening? On LinkedIn. Those little clips you get, that 30-second sound bite. I said, do me a favor. Can you just click the link one time? Just once, click the link and listen to the whole episode. So there's people that think that's a great, you used to take all this time to do 30 seconds of podcasts. It's amazing. There's more to it, but that whole platform has been amazing for me to get to know people as well too. All the names that you mentioned are the same names that I think have led us to be connected as well too, through this world of podcasting and through Lean, through these LinkedIn lives that Jesse and Jen will do. Those are fun to interact within those as well too. And these are all platforms of communication that are helping me connect with people across the world. Jesse and Adam actually visited in town. They had a convention that they were both speaking at, and it was kind of funny. I don't remember the name of it. It was some kind of heady, capabilities type of, I don't even know what it was about, but the titles of the things they were speaking on was like 8 or 10 words. Like if your title of what you're speaking on is 8 or 10 words, you might want to revise how many words that you're putting in there.
Maybe that point isn't being delivered clearly.
So they came in, but I met up with them. We had supper together, and those are the kind of neat connections that you can make through this platform and really through LinkedIn too, as well.
Yeah, Jen, Jesse, and Felipe have all been to my house. So that's a connection I've only known through LinkedIn for however long. And then one time I just happened to be in San Antonio, and I took a picture for LinkedIn because I'm on LinkedIn a lot. Let's just get that out of the way. And Jesse said, wait, I know where you are. Do you want to meet for breakfast? And I thought that was the creepiest thing anyone on LinkedIn has ever done, was stalk my location. And then we ended up meeting, having a breakfast, and a really good time.
LinkedIn stalking. Yep.
I've had it more than once now. Another Steve Turner. You familiar with him?
So there's two Steve Turners.
Not to bring back the trades, but the other one.
He and I have had a little bit of LinkedIn interaction as far as he was a Toastmaster. So he had commented about something when I became the club growth director for the district, which is the Colorado, Wyoming, parts of Nebraska, and a completely unpopulated part of Utah. It is all part of our district. He had made a comment about that. And so that's kind of been our only interaction. I watched some of his videos on Lean as well. So we have a bit of a connection that way. And that's another one of those, if he and I were to run into each other, we could have a chat for an hour over stuff because of a small connection through LinkedIn. But what's your question about?
We ate at Papados is all. And I'm like, that's somebody I've only known through LinkedIn commentary, through back and forth. And we went out and had lunch. So my surrogate for, I guess, this deep lack of family I have inside of me is fulfilled on LinkedIn. Despite me being spicy to everybody I connect with. Nobody is safe from some spicy comment coming down.
I love it.
Are you okay with the edginess? Because I see we're still connected. I see you're on the show. So
there's a couple of times. No, it's not for everybody. And I'm always that's always that attraction. That's the part where I feel like I'm too much of a curmudgeon. I need to be better at being more edgy. And I feel like I'm being racy, when I misspell a word or something on purpose just to make people mad. So I've got to work on that. But no, there's that definite draw in that. No, you can't offend me. I have one feeling and I do keep it packed away pretty well. So you can try if you'd like.
Yeah, my dad gave me a healthy tool for moderating my feelings, and that's bury it until you die. And so
hey,
that's generally my approach to life. But if you can't laugh at it, I don't think, one, you know it well enough, and two, you haven't come to terms with it. So if you're able to laugh at it, I think you can grow that much more as a person. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm dumb, maybe I'm masochistic, but that's where my brain is these days.
Well, there's certainly back to that curmudgeon idea of lean, and even in construction, there's some guys that within our company these guys are award-winning superintendents. Like we've got a great marketing group, but ENR, Golden Eagles or Shiny Eagles, I don't know. These guys are winning gigantic awards for $100 million projects. Like these guys are the top of their game, but they don't look very happy sometimes. And there's a lot of responsibility that goes with, I know, building large projects, and I'm not on those type of large projects, but there's just that, why can't you have fun? And that's what I think is missing through a lot of people, like anymore, because I'm such an optimist. What you can't see is the quote that I've got back up there is by Colin Powell, which is, optimism is a force multiplier. And that's really one of my favorite quotes from him, and in general, being that you can go in with really negativity. Once negativity enters, then there's a very good chance you're going to fail. And so I'm a mechanic. Used to have some rusty old tools, but if you know what a torque multiplier is, when you're working in turbines and you're working in things that need torque, it's almost a mechanical device that amplifies the torque that you're applying to a nut to tighten something up. So in understanding that idea of multiplier, and then that's a quote from Colin Powell, is exactly it. If the minute you think it's going to fail, it probably will. And you have to get rid of all doubt. And that's where negativity is, where creativity goes to die. Once you have that negativity, you're not creative. If you're not creative, then you're not problem solving. And I've seen a couple of guys recently within my career, older gentlemen who just lost their desire to solve problems on the job. And it was just a slow decline. And it was just depression a little bit. It was just through COVID. I ended up having to let him go because I could not get him out of that kind of depression. He's like, oh, these guys didn't show up and these guys didn't do this. And he had all these reasons on not solving his problems on the job. And I'm like, that is the two things we do in construction. We drive schedule and solve problems. If you can't do both of those things, again, keeping it simple. I know there's a lot of stuff that goes into building an entire building, but keeping it simple like that to those two items, and you can't do 50% of your job. And he wasn't driving schedule either. So now he's doing 0% of his job because he had lost his optimism. There was no success in his mind to be able to complete that. And that whole idea of optimism has changed and turned my life probably in the last 2 to 3 years, where I've had to change my mindset because we as superintendents tend to always look at the negative side. What can go wrong? Because I'm trying to solve, well, this is going to go wrong. That's going to go wrong.
What is going to push the schedule back is inherently a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're looking for those things and almost projecting them instead of saying, we're going to, look beyond them and try to solve these problems. And that's the thing that fascinates me about lean is solving problems. Now, this goes back to, I did do the AGC lean classes, 7 classes. I didn't certify. It was painful because it was outdated, in my opinion. We ended up doing it through COVID electronically, through Zoom, and the manipulation of the, what do you call those practices? I forget the word. What do you call that? It's
like right at the tip of my tongue, and it's killing me that I don't know the word.
Anyway, those things were painful to do through Google Docs. So it didn't make for a fun experience, for one, but going through those herringbone, some of these old problem solving ideas, they're somewhat functional, but weren't really functional for me. I couldn't apply them, and maybe they were how they were presented. But there's so many more new ways that we are applying problem solving to everything that we do. And it's that mindset. And you can't do that without some level of optimism.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never seen a negative guy go on to do great things, but I also don't know that many great people. There's also that.
Average guys are somewhat optimistic.
Yeah, that's the message I want to get home to the audience today. Average guys are somewhat optimistic. Well, James, if you had to pick, you get one idea from lean to bring into the world, what would it be? Is the most impactful, and why?
Wow. So it's my idea, or an idea that I have?
A concept from the lean world community. practice, body of knowledge.
If there was one idea, probably consolidating the idea of lean into one statement. How does that sound?
That's probably a good one. It only gets to be one S.
Communicate. That's the word. One S.
This guy, James Gable, absolute snake. Communicate.
I really do think that lean and of course I'm a communication guy. Follow the podcast, all of that stuff. But it really does come down to communication. Any way you look at and break it down, when you look at even like some of the examples that the one piece flow and all those other ideas, you're setting these systems up, which again, I'm a systems beginner. The system has to be correct and in place, but you're communicating with those different lines down the road. So it really does come down to how are you communicating through your lean.
We are back with James Gable. James, tell me about the bookshelf behind you. What do you got?
I don't think you're recording.
I'm recording.
I didn't say yes.
I'm recording. You know what? Let's leave this in intentionally. We are recording, or are we? Here's the big mystery.
Okay, so I'll just share my feelings now. So if you got the recording off, let's get deep into this one then.
Yeah, that Hitler conversation, I'm so glad it's not making it to air.
Yeah, I think that got cut out, hopefully.
So tell us about the books behind you. What do you got?
They are only for looks. No, that's not true. The big book that I have really spent a lot of time reading is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. It has been a great book in learning techniques on communication, negotiation. I read it so many times, and it finally occurred to me, I read it so many times because I couldn't get it. It was a complete shift in how you approach your words and your mindset that my mind I couldn't embrace it. I'm like, this is simple. I'm having a hard time doing it because it rewires how we ask questions. You're really interested in this type of work. Those are approaches that I had never applied before in that type of communication to try to draw out conversation from people. And so I've spent a lot of time in that book. I do have the Lean Builder back there. How about little shout out to Keon and Joe DeMaruma for the Lean Builder.
None of it's got my book in it. Shame, for shame.
I heard you wrote a book.
I did. I wrote a book called Chasing Excellence, and it's about how to programmatically solve problems in the funny and zany way Jake does it in his own brain. So there are aliens. There are all kinds of unique stuff you might choose to love or hate. What is happening there? All right, I don't have audio on you.
I don't know what happened.
I show you in here twice, and I can see you on both sides of you.
Kicked me out, and I came in twice.
Look. Okay, well, we're back with James Gable and his twin brother, James Gable, who's got the same Hawaiian t-shirt.
That's twinsies, my friend.
I don't know, what the weird. I've never seen Zoom do that, but if it records that way, we're leaving it in. That's just too good.
Oops, now I'm gone. Yeah, I don't know what there.
James left us, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, we're stuck with James.
He was a loser.
The book I keep on shelf in advertising is John's book, actually. And this is John Thacker's How to Win Right Now as an Operations Supervisor, where he wrote it just because when he was an operations supervisor in the warehouse space, nobody had any of the prerequisite soft skills training that he really needed to be successful. So after his years of learning those by trial and error, he just sought to put them in a book for anybody. And that meant so much to me and was ultimately the inspiration for me writing my book and how we fell in love.
So it was a book love. I would like to write a book. I've got a couple of ideas, but that seems like a lot of work. And,
anybody could do it. They let me do it. There's no law that says you have to meet some certain criteria.
Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate you sending me that free copy of that book. If you could sign it, that would be amazing.
Oh, it's signed and it's heading your way.
Books have they've changed how I've thought over the last couple of years with COVID coming into play. I don't physically read too many books, but I listen to a lot of audio books. So if a book's on audio, you've got me. And the other one that I don't have a physical copy of is Turn the Ship Around by David Marquet, which is a fantastic book on leadership, which oddly enough is exactly how I approach leadership for most of my career, which is this create a leader mentality. You create this relationship where I'm helping you become a leader, so I'm not making your decisions for you, which is the exact setup of a captain of a naval, of a submarine, which is what he was. Is that captain is like the head of the octopus, and he has to know how every bolt turns to the right and to the left, and every operating system. And when he leaves, that ship loses its rankings because that one guy left and he didn't train anyone behind him. And David Marquet came in, and that whole story of how he had to go to a ship to fully understand. And in doing that, he relied on the people that were there, and he changed the whole nature of how leadership is done with this leader idea, where somebody comes to you and say, hey, I intend to do this. So they're coming with ideas, and you're saying, very well, or underway, or carry on. And that leadership idea fit how I've done it. And it's almost amplified how I have wanted to develop leaders, because you can't develop a leader by telling somebody what to do. And we do that a lot. And especially you look at some of our larger projects, that's exactly what our superintendent is the job down, because he is the guy that's running it. Well, that's not a good leader. It creates great for the ego, but it's not great for the project itself. So that's another book that has really changed how I think and how I operate.
Yeah, as currently I serve as the director of lean transformation for Quality Sausage Company. Like, my job is not to solve problems. Like, you're getting it wrong if you do that. My job is to increase your problem solving ability. And if I accomplish that, we all benefit from that. And if I solve a problem, we benefit essentially nothing.
Right. Well, and when I found out you were the lean guy for a sausage factory, and based on your title on LinkedIn, I did a little research to see how real that was.
Oh, I know. There's a long list of people like, are you joking? Is this a funny thing? Because sausages are lean, ha, ha, ha. Or the other humorous things that are in my lauded past. But no, it's legit a thing. I am in the food manufacturing world now for the past 90 days.
And that's really where I think I cut my teeth on the ideas of lean. Having been a millwright by trade and worked in tons of manufacturing facilities, like the list is pretty large. I've worked in beer plants and bread factories and can plants and bottling plants and chocolate factories, not the creepy one with the creepy guy in it, but I did work at Ghirardelli in California in their chocolate factory. And I guess we'll call it sounds weird to call it a factory, but working in those types of manufacturing, you see the ideas of process and how they do what they can to make sure that your product flow goes from one end to the other. And that's what's still kind of amazing to me when I think about construction, when I jumped into the idea of lean, because to me, it's a manufacturing idea. And why are we doing it so still, in my mind, poorly in construction? Like, we've been doing it almost 30 years now. I think I used to say 28 years. So I think I've been saying that for a couple of years now. So anywhere between 28 and 30 years is when the construction lean idea got presented. Over 30 years. And how different is our processes now compared to the change you see that Toyota even still puts into place every day when they're making those changes? We're not doing it in construction yet. And that's probably going to be my next, what's the magic key? What are we missing to move from being lean in construction to actually getting lean into construction like they do in a manufacturing? Mm-hmm. And do you have that key? Like, what is that magic? What can construction learn from the sausage industry?
Well, I'll tell you broader my opinion, and then I'll zone into sausage, but it's a little sharp for the lean world. But if you have some esoteric view of how improvement should actually work, that's great. But if you don't know, speak, or coach through actually improving something, shut the hell up. That's my point for the whole world, because they want to talk Japanese, they want to have ideas, they want to present themselves as experts, but the whole community hasn't moved very far. So if you're not actually moving the community, shut up. Like that's kind of where I'm at, right? If you've got expertise, if you want to get involved and do some things, do them, win, celebrate, communicate it with the world. Get that out for everybody, as many people to take home with them. But if you're not, shut up.
Well, and that's where I've kind of tiptoed around some of my friends who are coaches, consultants. What I saw as I went through the AGC training, and I'm like, I'm jazzed about this. Like, let's improve. We're going to improve this, right? We're going to fix it. And everyone that I saw that I think did it were now consultants. So is the money in the consulting, or is the money in, I want to go on the job? And because my world is small in the view that I've seen lean construction on projects, I think for the most part, they've kept it secret, a best kept secret of their job. Now I'm communicating with people that are within the lean community who are sharing those things. This is great, but I've seen everybody turn into this consultant idea. And to me, that's not what I'm looking for. Although I've been told, I made that comment to somebody, and twice they're like, well, there's good money in it. Well, is it? I thought we were fixing, I guess in my mind, I thought we were
the blood money
the world. And then now there's like, I could make that changeover. I'm a good talker, and, maybe I'll get a couple of certifications, and maybe I'll be a lean consultant somewhere. But that's not what I want. I want to see our industry change. And I'm not exactly sure how it gets there other than building material changes. Maybe that's my first idea that I have, because I'm watching, there's a bunch of apartments going up near my house, and these pallets, gigantic pallets, show up with prefabricated walls. And within a day, they're pre-building them in a factory, and they're bringing them in, and they're erecting an entire floor of multiple condo type townhome apartments in a day. So is that the next step? But it's still wood framing. What are we doing for commercial framing? I see the belief, the mentality, the philosophy of lean we're trying to implement across our teams, where we're thinking better, because we're not thinking very good. We're confusing things. We're making it harder for our trade partners, but we're trying to improve those communications. But for us to really be effective, we've got to change how we're installing the construction. And I haven't seen enough of it. I've seen some videos on LinkedIn where they're flying up framed walls into a building, where they're doing the same thing that I was talking about at the apartments down the road. Those are great improvements, but that's happened in the last 5 years of these 30 years, maybe. So, and we're still having to throw drywall on a wall. So I don't know what those solutions are, but it still seems like to me we're working in the dark ages, and the documents that we're working off of are these philosophical philosopher doctor wrote with fancy words documents that are talking about just kind of these ethereal ideas, and not really things that I apply to construction right now.
Yeah, that's been just about my assessment summed up in a nutshell. Is we're really good at talking about the esoteric idea, don't have a lot that's actually coming out of it. And let's be clear here, to improve something, you actually have to physically change the way something is done. Period, full stop. There's no improvement that doesn't have that. But James, absolute pleasure getting the time to speak hour with you. Any message you want to drive home, deliver to our audience today?
Yeah, this one thing, if everybody did this, I will stop my podcast. As soon as everybody is a great communicator. Think about your conversations. Are they happening? Have that enlightenment. And so there's two things. There's enlightenment and ownership. Own your conversations. When you're working with somebody that you can have a conversation with. Those are the two things, ownership and enlightenment. If you do those two things, you're going to make my life easier. You're going to make those around you a little bit easier, because they know that you're going to facilitate that conversation to a mutual understanding. So that's my plea to everybody, is let's work on it. We can't just push it under the rug anymore, but let's just get better at it.
Wow. James, Gable, the Uncommon Communicator, thank you very much for the time. To all the world out there that decided to stick through us, have a good night.